It's part of a facet of marketing, and I think it's we build our audiences in increments. And so this is just one thing that I think we ought to think about and talk about, because it really has to do with downtowns and how our markets are growing in the downtown area. So I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to repeat some information. It'll be repeated in the video and repeated in my slides, because frequency builds understanding. I'm going to show you a video. Oh, let me just test this out too. Yep, there it is. Love that icon. It's like I could just look at it all day. So let me start the video, and then, like I said, I'll repeat some things as well, and then we'll get a good discussion going.
Located in the heart of downtown, the Seattle Symphony strives to be a vital part of its community and the city's cultural fabric.
The Seattle Symphony's mission is to unleash the power of music, bring people together, and lift the human spirit.
But with Seattle serving as a hub for the tech industry, its demographics are changing, while at the same time, the audience for the Symphony's signature Masterworks series has been shrinking.
Sales of Masterworks had been declining in the past few years.
And that decline went for about 3 years, something on the order of about 7 to 10% a year. So it was significant.
As they grappled with this problem, the Symphony speculated about the people moving into the surrounding downtown community.
We had the theory going in that there's all these people moving into downtown and that they should be coming to Benaroya Hall and to see the orchestra. But we didn't know if they were or not, or if they were, what they liked or what they didn't like.
The Seattle Symphony theorized that their less formal bold programs might appeal to this potential downtown audience more than their traditional Masterworks series.
A lot of what we did with establishing these new bold programming strands was partly about trying to find new audiences, but also partly about signaling to the community that we were thinking differently.
Our Untuxed series of concerts was designed intentionally to appeal to people who might like a less formal atmosphere when they're going out to a concert, that would be convenient for their schedules, so an earlier start time on a Friday.
Good evening. Hi, my name is John Green. I'm a bass player in the orchestra here. It's my honor to welcome you to our concert tonight, Untuxed.
For sonic evolution, the goal was very, very different. As you know, many very popular artists started here in Seattle, such as Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Sir Mix-a-Lot, and we wanted to work with these artists and also to embrace the communities that enjoy their music but would never come to a classical concert hall.
Untitled is Fridays at 10 for a smaller, more adventurous audience, an exploration of 20th and 21st century music. Things that you just would not see anywhere else. Important music that rarely gets heard.
We've been doing these ongoing...
The Seattle Symphony conducted market research to find out more about the downtown residents and what motivates them to buy symphony tickets.
So it's a ton and ton.
It helped us to really dig more deeply into who our audience was and how they perceived the programming. And then we also wanted to try and understand what sort of additional enhancements to concerts or audience engagement activities, how that affected concert going. We probably sent out 20,000 surveys, and we got a great response back. We got well over 2,000, 2,500 surveys back to us. So it was statistically significant to us. And we did somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 or 9 focus groups, a lot of different mixed and matched sorts of focus groups to help parse out the thinking of these patrons.
Being able to apply real rigor into understanding who the audience is and how they behave is incredibly important. Let's find out if that's what the audience really wants.
Paid.
The market research helped the Seattle Symphony understand the downtown community and confirmed the idea that it was a potential audience.
What I really want to talk about, I'm going to repeat some of the information you just saw, because I really want to sort of focus on this notion of a downtown market. And we were under the impression that this downtown market was coming to the concerts that we thought they would want to come to. And in fact, as Simon pointed out, Simon Woods, they were actually coming to our main series, and they were coming to special concerts. Well, not to get ahead of myself, let me just talk a bit about the growth of downtown. This is actually a view of what I see when I walk out of my building downtown. Nice big crane, plenty of cranes in Seattle. But this downtown growth, it's actually double the rest of the market, the rest of the Seattle market, and projected to, grow even more as we go forward. So we had this notion, when you get an invitation to apply for a lot of money, and you start to go, well, what we would want to do with this money? What sort of audience building could we do? And so we asked ourselves some questions, like, we know there's a growing downtown population. We didn't know much about them. Are they a thing? Is it something that we could take advantage of? What do they like? How do they respond to the things we send them? And then we defined an area, a specific area around the hall. Some of you may remember Steve Case, the head of AOL, who's once said that convenience is king, and it's a sort of line I've lived by ever since. And one of the things that's convenient about downtown is you can walk to the hall, right? And we always struggle with the suburbs and getting people to come in from outside because there's traffic and there's parking issues. Thinking about downtown, this is an audience that's in close proximity to us. That was one of our part of our thinking, and fortunately Wallace thought this was intriguing as well. And so this is how we defined it. The sort of purplish area is just where there's a more concentrated number of single households. And let me just talk a little bit about what we assumed. We, of course, assumed that they were younger and that they were working in tech, which was pretty easy to understand because every morning when I went down the elevator in my building, it was usually filled with somebody working at Microsoft or Amazon. We thought they would like these less traditional concerts. And we thought that they could afford tickets. So Wallace, separately from our grant, funded a lot of research for us. They funded a bunch of focus groups that we did. Although Simon Woods said in there that they don't respond to traditional media, they actually do respond to postcards. We found that postcards were important, and along with email, of course. So those became our main drivers. We did something like 12,000 surveys, both to our population of people who bought single tickets and those who didn't. And then we did a lot of data analysis with Elliott Marketing, looking at our own data and then looking at sort of census data as well and Experian data. And from that, here's what we learned, that 43% of the households have a millennial primary decision maker. Sometimes you might have 2 or 3 decision makers within an apartment. So if 2 or 3 people are living together, they're single households, so they were counted as such. And that they hadn't lived there very long. So 5 years or less at the current address, real high levels of interest in the arts, but not likely to donate, no surprise there. That they were seeking sort of unique cultural experiences, because that's really another common, sort of trait of millennials. And that and this is also sort of something we also have to keep in mind, we had a greater percentage of households with incomes of $25,000 or less. In downtown Seattle, there are a number of buildings dedicated for fixed income people. Catholic Charities, Dorothy Day House, the Josephinium, where somebody on a fixed income just lives. And so that sort of sprinkles out through the whole area. The other thing that I didn't really put in here, I think I have it later, is that there's quite a number of empty nesters or retirees who move into the downtown areas now as well. And when we would go out and do little musical events at a big apartment building, almost always half the audience that came or more were retirees or empty nesters who simply had sold their home in the suburbs and had moved downtown. So it's, when you think about it, it's kind of a really neat mix of potential audience members. We also, and I think it was pointed out in the video too, we actually were reaching a lot of people already without having done much. I think our penetration rate in this area was something like 12%. Also that was pointed out in the video that penetration rates were higher for everything than the rest of the market, but especially for masterworks and special concerts. So that was one of our learnings. Was like, they actually weren't coming so much to these other sort of offbeat series that we had, non-traditional series. They're actually coming to our primary series. So it's kind of interesting when you think you're creating something for people that, like, oh, they'll definitely love this and this is what they want. No, actually that's not the case. And that's what's, the wonder of data is helping you understand that. So this is just to give you a sense of the penetration. So the first bar on the left is 2014, 2015, where we hadn't started doing anything. I think we brought Jerry on at the end of 2016 or towards the end. And then the bar on the left was actually, we still had 5 months left in the season. So I wish I had the updated slide, but it would show that it was, it had gone up even from the 2016 season. So you met Jerry Kunkel in the video, Jerry is like one of these really great guys who just loves to sell and be out there. And so we hired him, and his sole focus is on downtown. And he makes huge effort to meet all the condominium and apartment building people. They have a whole concierge association in and of themselves. He also is in connection with all the hotels and also the corporate world as well in the downtown area. And I failed in my technology efforts to show you a few brochures that basically say, hello neighbor, hey, we're your neighbor, we're right here in the downtown area, come over and visit us. Part of what we realized, and this is this is why I was kind of downplaying this in a way, as much as effort as we put into it, there were some really simple things that came out of it. For instance, let me go to the next slide here. So this is what Jerry did in his first year with us, first full year. He sold 3,000 extra tickets that we hadn't sold before, $105,000 in new money, and then there were some renewals as well because we already had a little bit of a market there. But it wasn't some sort of slick marketing effort that we made. It was basically just going and meeting people and saying hello and introducing ourselves and trying to have a few events that it was a very analog approach to this, which I think should make us all feel good because it still works. So we were really proud of Jerry's results, and he more than paid for himself, which was even better. And this is a slide that kind of looks at sort of ticket buyer households, how it's grown over the last 2 years in particular. And here's the revenue. This is total revenue, by the way, from the down. So it's not all Jerry here. So you can see the growth we've had. And then this is one of those questions that we get as well, like, well, are they coming back? Do they buy more than one ticket? And this just gives you a sense of yes, the great majority come to one ticket. Well, maybe they buy again in another year, but many of them do buy additional tickets through the rest of the year. So now I want to pivot over because it's been a lot about Seattle, but I really want to talk about just downtowns in general and this is where you guys come in. And let me check the time. We're doing great. So I teach a class at Roosevelt University here in Chicago. It's an online class, and I had been puzzling over how to make this presentation about downtown, Seattle's downtown, sort of apply to everybody else. And one of our students did her capstone project, and she wrote in her paper she was doing it was an imaginary orchestra that they had to create a whole profile around and an analysis. And she was talking about the donut effect that that big cities used to have, where it was sort of white flight, out of the downtown and out into the suburbs. But in fact, what she was pointing out was that it's actually been reversing in recent years. And so this is just a snapshot from across the country. I just Googled this the other day. Kansas City, strong demand for downtown. Syracuse, downtown living is hot. Indianapolis, Salt Lake City. It was just like the list went on and on of all the downtowns who are sort of reviving, as it were. At different rates and at different degrees of volume. But it did strike me that downtown is kind of a thing. I started to, I should have done it because enough of you are older. I started to put a Petula Clark quote in here. And I thought, no, don't do that. That's really silly. So there's this combination of millennials who are moving into downtown and cities who are trying to hang on to millennials as well. So cities are doing things to keep the millennials there, because it used to be that about 90% of them, once they decided they wanted to have children and they wanted to, have the amenities of a family, 90% of them would move out to the suburbs. Well, the most recent numbers are that it's more like 60 to 65% in those cities where there's actually a big effort to keep the downtown, keep people in the downtown. So, adding better schools, more conveniences, et cetera. And then there's a few quotes here about empty nesters as well, and that, as I mentioned earlier, moving into downtown. I thought this was kind of interesting, and I thought this is something that all of you might find intriguing, because even if you live in a smaller market town, I would bet your downtown is in some way reviving.